Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope everyone had nice, restful week off of programming. And we got a great one today to kick off the second half of the summer. But before I do that, I know we have a couple new folks on the wall today. So just two big ground rules I want to set up. One of them is to please have your camera on throughout the entire session. If you have any trouble, and the second rule is if you have any trouble with any of your technology, especially turning your camera on, please email the support team at HBS Live Online, and you'll see that in the chat pretty soon. So with that, I will kick off today's session on the founder mindset, developing judgment. We have a great panel we'll get to in a little bit, and it will be led by Professor Reza Satchu, who is a senior lecturer in the entrepreneurship management unit at HBS. He also teaches as many of you know, he also teaches the first year course Entrepreneurial Manager and the founder mindset in the second year. And he's also the founder and managing partner at Alignvest Management Corporation. So that's enough of me. We'll get to the show, and with that, I'll turn things over to Reza.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ben. All right, so if you guys can all put on your videos, that would be helpful. And if you can't, I'd ask you to leave. Okay, let's get started. Okay, Conrad, let me start with you. Why are you here?
I'm here because I want to learn how I can grow the business I'm working for right now.
If you could grow the business, and what are you hoping? What is it from this session that you're hoping to learn that will increase the likelihood of that happening?
I want to take takeaways that I can compel my co-founders and the rest of the team, to be decision makers, pure and simple.
Okay, Diana, what about you? Why are you here today?
Well, I've heard your talk in September, and it really helped me back then to kind of commit to focusing on entrepreneurship during the year. And now I'm doing rock, and I think I could just kind of I'm looking forward to hearing your encouragement.
So Diana, on what level have you been most disappointed with yourself on your founder journey?
I feel like I've been digressing in self-confidence on being able to do this.
Right. And so what does that feel? What does it feel like? Like, give me the moments of when this happens and what it feels like.
I feel like often I look at other companies trying to solve this problem, and then I'm like, oh, why don't I just go work for them? And I don't feel like I have right now. I don't have the winner mindset that I want to have to kind of go and attack this, because I know it's not being attacked the way that I think it needs to be. But I keep getting back to a 7-year-old me and being like, I'm not sure I can do this.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think you're constitutionally capable of being a founder, or do you think that's to be determined?
No, I think I am.
And so the biggest obstacle in your mind that you'll have to get over to getting there is to actually be confident enough to do what?
To just get stuff done, talk about it confidently, give myself permission to say I have the right to attack this problem.
Yeah. So what would it require for you to do that?
Well,
because I think we would all dream about being able to confidently think that something is likely to happen, because of course it would reduce all the fears that all of you have, right? Because then it would be easy. The decision would be very easy. So what is it that you require in order to achieve this? It could be information. What is it? You tell me, what is it for you that you require?
Well, I think for now, incrementality has helped me, and seeing that I achieve the things that I set out to do, and just kind of walking the talk, because from down here the mountain seems really high, but if you start walking up, the view gets much better. So that has helped me, and then I think just being very mindful about your own mental health, to kind of have positive kind of thought cycles.
Okay, Casey, are you committed to being a founder?
Yeah, I am.
Fully committed. So are you racked by the same insecurities that Diana and others are racked by, or do you manage them in a different way?
feel for that sort of
Hard to hear.
inspiration. You see, sorry, other people trying to run after the same problem. I think the biggest challenge that I've been feeling is trying not to like jump ahead and getting really, really bare bones. Like go at like peeling back all the layers, trying to solve the core problem and not jumping ahead, trying to like develop something, do something with tech, and actually like just focusing on like tiny little baby steps, really understanding every variable along the way.
Okay, so we're going to get to some tactics around how one might increase their probability of success of actually founding something. But I just want us to take a step back and just calibrate for a minute, because it strikes me that founding something's hard. Like, it strikes me that it's hard, right? I mean, it's hard to do it. And so, you know, the question is, why do it? Meaning, a lot of folks at HBS get fancy jobs and do other things where they're well paid, and it feels like they're protecting their downside dramatically, and, you know, not much can go wrong. Like, I guess you need a pulse to go to Goldman or to McKinsey, but not much more, certainly from HBS. Okay, so like no one comes to HBS and thinks, wow, I got this job, right? Like maybe from where they came from 3 years ago they think that, but certainly once you come to HBS, you can't possibly think this is an amazing event. Okay, having talked to many of your classmates that are going to these places, they don't even think it's an amazing event. Okay, but yet so many do. So why is this path so hard, and what makes it worthwhile? Yeah, Drew, what do you think?
I think it's hard because you have to align your risk with your reward. Like there is no protecting your downside, so to speak, as you would with the traditional consulting job or whatever. And so you're aligning your risk and reward. And so there's an alignment of incentives that makes it scary, but also extremely rewarding if you're successful.
So do you think being a founder is a poor risk return coming out of HBS?
I don't know. I think it's a better risk return than it would be coming out of pretty much anywhere else because of the resources that we have here.
Okay, so I agree with that, but I'm asking a different question. Do you think it's a good risk return?
I think personally, yes, because of the experience that you gain, even as a first-time founder, if you're not successful, you're surrounded by a community that's going to support you, and the likelihood of success coming out of here, I think is much higher than a lot of people probably expect.
Okay, so what is so let's just be clear. Presumably, we're going down this path because there is some upside that we're trying to chase. Right? There's something that we are chasing or that we want through this path. Okay, so Ali, what do you want out of this path? What is it that you want out of this path?
I suppose I'm the only Ali on the call, so
yeah.
So to be honest, out of this, it's kind of proving to the people back home that you can actually do it abroad. I'm from Saudi Arabia, and we've. You know, I say this to my classmates, my friends. Look, we're given so many privileges as Saudi students. We're on scholarships and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, and we go and we take these, you know, Goldman offers or whatever offers that are like McKinsey offers back home, and we become employees. And I'm like, if there's ever a nationality that de-risks like your entire life, it's where we come from. And I'm like, it's only right, I guess, to humanity that you take that risk when you can. I might be like
right, but for what purpose, Ali? So what purpose? What are you hoping to achieve by taking this risk?
I guess what I really want is that I want people to get out of the employee mindset to more of a founder mindset, especially if you want to progress. Like I'm a person that really loves his country. I want my fellow countrymen and women to also embark on something aspirational, and that's kind of like what I want to do. I want to be that person.
Okay, so let's because I've done this enough times to know this to be true, that all of you have a deep belief that you can have a positive impact on a community, or certainly on more than just yourself. Okay, Like you all want to have a positive impact, okay, fair? Right, and it'll be born out of some childhood trauma or some, but it's certainly something bigger than yourself, and yet most of you will never achieve that impact that you want to have, right? Most of you won't. And it's actually interesting because you'd say to yourself, well, why is that? Why is it that all these HBS students who come here wanting to solve poverty in the state from India that they're in or increase healthcare access in inner city schools, why is it that they feel entirely clear that it's possible for them to do this sitting at HBS? And yet they make a set of decisions leaving HBS that seem quite inconsistent with that North Star of impact. Okay, so let's just all agree that we all want to have a positive impact. I mean, I think we would all say, we just came from I was just with Bob Waldinger, who did the Harvard Happiness Study, and he does a study about, 800 people at the end of their lives. And what they talk about is sort of the most important thing is sort of having a positive impact on people you care about, having enduring long-term relationships, okay, which of course require commitment, and we'll come back to that in a minute, okay? But the reality is okay, so what does that all mean? Okay, what does it mean to have this positive impact? So sitting at your stage, what I'd say is there are two things that lead to maximize the probability of success that you can have the thing you most want, which is positive impact, and that is learning as much as possible, okay? Learning as much as possible as quickly as possible, okay? And with that, the resources, the confidence, the capabilities, such that others will follow the things you want to do in terms of the impact that you want to have. So then the question is, what is learning? Okay, what does learning actually mean? And so you guys have heard my definition of learning. I would ask others what theirs is. My definition of learning is very clear. It's making consequential decisions that you are accountable for. Full stop. Okay? Because it is through that you develop the trait that you most want, which is judgment. Okay? It is judgment. So going back to Diana's point, what she is suffering from is a crisis of judgment. Okay? The reason she's not confident about the decisions she can't make is because she doesn't trust her judgment. So then the question is, well, what is this thing, judgment? Like, how do I get some of that? I'd like more judgment, right? Why is it that, these people who become founders can suddenly run big businesses having never been trained to run big businesses? Well, it's because they start making decisions. And it's in a decision is where judgment lies. It's where there's uncertainty, there's not enough capital, all these kinds of things. Okay? A decision is where maximal learning happens because it's where judgment lies. And the thing about judgment, just like any other muscle, is it can be developed and it can be expanded, but you've actually got to start testing it and using it. Okay? So what I would encourage you as you think about this path, a founder path, okay? The reason to become a founder at its core is because you want to have a positive impact on the community, on your family, on the community, on whoever it is you care about, the world. But that path, the way to get there is by maximizing learning. And the way to maximize learning is by making decisions. And the reason that's so important is because you develop the thing you most want, which is judgment. Okay? That is what being a founder is. It's all about testing your judgment. And the great thing about testing your judgment is it aligns completely with the things that most people want in their lives. Now, here's the problem, okay, and especially with folks like you, is the most difficult judgment you're going to have to make is to commit, right? It's to actually commit. In all that uncertainty, to actually commit. And the problem with you committing is a number of things. One is you perceive yourselves to having tons of options. So why would you commit to something when there are all sorts of other options around there? There's also a mistaken view of people coming out of here that they don't need to commit because they have the degree, they have the relationships, such that they can compete against people not from HBS that are committed. And what I will tell you that anyone that's committed will crush anyone that isn't committed, okay? And so then the question is what does it take to commit to uncertainty, right? Because by definition, you're committing based on your judgment, which you don't actually trust yet, right? It's still something that's in process, okay? So my sense is you guys are all this summer in this program not certain about whether you should trust your judgment or not certain about whether the other options that are on the table and that your other classmates are doing are better or worse. And it's sort of this double-edged sword, because the less you're committed, the less likely anything's going to happen, right? For two reasons, right? One is you don't actually learn what you're capable of until you commit, right? Like, you don't actually learn whether you can swim until you actually jump in the ocean. And two, magic doesn't happen until you commit, especially from a place like this, right? Especially from a place like this. Commitment plus HBS leads to lots of magical things that can happen. It's not easy, but certainly, does your first investor show up? More likely from here than anywhere else. Does your first customer show up? More likely from here than anywhere else. And what I want you to keep in mind as you think about this is, I think HBS has it all wrong. Being a founder is exactly what people from HBS should aspire to do. It's how we make the world a better place. It's how we get more jobs. It's how we increase prosperity. It's all of those things. It's how we learn the most. Okay? It is exactly what this school should aspire to do, is to create more founders. And guess what? The world is very different and getting even more different, such that the barriers to becoming a founder are far lower today than they've ever been. And yet, HBS is trapped in this mindset where being a founder is somehow not seen as the optimal path to go. Even though if I asked every one of your classmates, if you could be, someone who's actually creating something where you have all the benefits of being a founder, power, freedom, control, resources, impact, all this stuff, they would all say they would do that all day long rather than going to Bain or BCG or Blackstone or wherever they go. All day long. But yet they're racked by fear. Okay? And what I would argue is there is a complete miscalibration of risk that goes on here. Okay? Meaning the upside is far greater than the downside. Far greater. Okay? Even on the downside, right? Like, just read the recent research. Paul Gomper just sent out a research report which actually shows that failed founders with the same educational and previous professional background as non-founders that take a corporate path, those failed founders, forget about successful founders, those failed founders come back to the corporate world with 3 years seniority. Because people understand it. Those failed founders, even though they failed, they did the thing that provides the most learning, which is tested their judgment. And even when it's flawed, there's learning, okay? So here's my question around commitment, okay? Because commitment isn't just, I want you to think about commitment as not a sacrifice. Like, I think many HBS students that I talk to, they come to me and they're like, it's such a sacrifice to commit to one thing. I have all these other fancier options, okay, or fancy options. And the reality is they don't actually know what's possible if they actually commit, and they never will, right? I have this saying, which is that the only thing worse than having one shot and not taking it is what will happen to many of you, which is you'll have hundreds of shots and never take one. Okay, like that really is a brutal existence, okay? But I'm guaranteeing you so many of your classmates will lead a life like that, okay? So many. And so the question is what's it going to take to commit? So I want to hear from someone who is going to be open about the anxiety they have. I mean, I know some of you are here just like because you're sponsored, you have no interest in being a founder, and this is like a great thing to sort of, pretend like you're going to be a founder. So I don't want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from people who are actually interested in being a founder, but racked with insecurity around committing. Okay, so who can speak to that? I mean, it's at least half of you. I mean, I know this is true. Okay, so like, who's got the guts to actually say something? Yeah, Grace.
I think for me, a big question mark is I think there's like being a female founder, and then I think like biological time clock, and then also that a lot of these other companies I think maybe I'm hearing more and more about like how important health insurance obviously can, like how good your health insurance is, like more and more like when you are a parent, for example. And I think there is real trade-offs and like um, like both work life balance, but also stability. I'm not saying like for some there's a lot of layoffs at these companies as well, but I think that is a big factor in the if this is the right thing. And so even when I'm looking at next year, I feel like sometimes um I feel like HBS is the best time to get funding, to get funding, investors, network. But then if it doesn't pan out, then do I still continue post graduation, knowing that like server costs will continue to go up, and like what that personal runway is?
Okay.
I think that's
So a couple things, right? There are some real personal issues, trade-offs around finances, and can you actually price that in to launching something? But I would say two things to Grace. One is it's no question, and I want to introduce our guest in a minute. It's no question that coming out of HBS gives you an opportunity to raise capital that doesn't exist in many other places. Okay. Now you need to reverse engineer that, like you actually need to start doing things this summer and not being reactive, but being incredibly proactive and following a path such that in the spring you're out asking for money, and there are lots of people who show up that want to give you money, okay? I also want to deal with this work-life balance, okay? So I hear this a lot, okay? I also hear a lot about sort of founder market fit and passion. So I want to say a couple things. I've never heard an HBS student come to me and say that they're layering in passion when they go take a consulting job or a hedge fund job or a banking job. Like, I've never heard it. No one has come to me and said, I'm passionate about this banking job, that's why I'm taking this banking job. It's never happened, okay? But yet suddenly, when it comes to being a founder, there's this passion thing, okay, which obviously narrows the bullseye of opportunities, okay? And I would ask you to think, I hope you find something you build that you're passionate about. But I would actually say I'm not sure the bullseye has to be that narrow, and most certainly a non-founder academic told you that you needed to operate that way, okay? And if you look at the world's greatest founders, in no way was Jeff Bezos passionate about selling books, okay? There was no founder market fit that Elon Musk had around cars. There were millions of people who were selling cars beforehand. Okay, so what I'd say to you is I think this passion thing, I'd ask you to think about passion in the context of the kind of life you want to lead and the kind of mindset you want to have. So I would say being a founder, the passionate piece is actually the life a founder leads, okay, the actual life of being a founder. And at its core, it's learning, it's decision making, at its core. You must want to learn as much as possible because you are actually making decisions that matter, okay? In terms of this work-life balance, okay, so the trade-off is very clear. I mean, I know obviously founders, and me too, I'll often say, oh, it's so hard because, of course, it's like walking uphill both ways, right? But the reality is what's great about being a founder is I'm ultimately in full control of my life. Like full control, right? Like, doesn't mean I'm not stressed, doesn't mean that I don't have to make every decision, but ultimately I'd way rather be in a position where I'm making the decisions than having some person above me telling me that I got to go fly to, I don't know, Dayton, I don't know where Dayton is, some city somewhere, okay? Okay, so my point is there's control versus work-life balance, okay? And I'd ask you to think about that. Okay, anyone else? I just want to, one more comment around this commitment piece because I feel Grace has been very honest about it. I feel that this is a issue that many of you have, and you understand the point I'm making, which is it's a real trade-off, right? Because in some ways, you're pricing the commitment without actually knowing what you're capable of. Like you don't actually know. You don't know. And so you value it at zero, which is a really unfortunate thing. It's a really unfortunate thing, right? The reason you got here is because you excelled and because you were at the far right tail. And now when I tell you the far right tail, and I think you agree with me, is being a founder, so many of you recoil. Like so many of you recoil. For the first time in your lives, you recoil. Okay? Because there's something really scary about this commitment. So who else? Who else is scared about this commitment? Yeah, Dylan.
So my anxiety comes from taking into account other people. So for example, my partner and how that would play out. So, post-graduation, you have to be realistic in a point of view of bills will come. You have to figure out apartments. You have to figure out debt. and just being able to see, how you can balance that with being a founder, because most likely you're probably not going to make money for the first, year or two. So that's my
look,
guess.
what I'd say on stuff like this, like you have enough information to know today whether you should be a founder or not. Meaning these are issues that you need to deal with now. And what I'd say to you, Dylan, is what I worry about as someone like this is like, don't pretend you're going to be a founder if you know this is a real issue. Like what it looks like to be a founder is you're going to have to delay economics, okay? But you know that. And so my point is I find too many people pretend that they want to be a founder, knowing that they'll never be a founder. Like, let's take an extreme. People who are sponsored, okay, as consultants who show up at Rock or who show up at my office and say they want to be founders. I won't even talk to those people. I literally will not even talk to those people because I know it's just BS. Like, I just know it's BS. Like, we're all kidding each other. It's just a game. And it's just a waste of everyone's time. So what I encourage you to do is don't pretend. Like, either you're going to do it and you're going to solve this financial problem, or it's a real issue and get off the train and do it later in life, right? But this idea that you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out will lead to, I've never seen it lead to anything good, okay? I've never seen it. And you know today whether you can do it or not by having a conversation with your wife and figure out whether you're willing to make the trade-offs or not. And if you're not, that's fine. Okay, I want to introduce 3 former students, okay? So what I thought about how to use this time, and I was talking to Elise about this, and I was saying, I'm thrilled that the Rock Center is now becoming more competitive, right? The idea that anyone could get into the Rock Center was just so ridiculous, right? It was so the idea that there's no accountability is crazy. I mean, you guys are going to there are changes that are being made, but if you actually want to build something of significance, you have to work super hard. You got to be accountable to things. You got to have metrics. It needs to be in a competitive environment. All of these things, okay, where you're maximizing learning, okay? And so I would encourage you guys to think about how you're doing that this summer, okay? Okay, so I want to introduce 3 students, okay? So these are all 3 students who I thought to myself, they are like you. Like, they're all like you, except, 2 of them are just graduating this month or last month, and 1 graduated a couple years ago. And they've all gone through their own cycles of getting to this point. So let me introduce them to you, and then we'll hear from one other guest, and then we'll open it up to questions. So David, can I ask you to, maybe you can just take a couple minutes to introduce yourself, your company, who you are, and then I've got a couple of questions for each of you.
Sure. Can you guys hear me from here? Good. I'm David O'Hara. It's nice to meet you all. I graduated about a month ago. I'm the founder of a company called Brace Health. We help independent healthcare practices get paid by insurance companies using AI to make it cheaper, faster, and less stressful for the owner. Before school, I was at a company called Brightwheel, built software for early education preschool programs, and before that, I worked at Bain.
Okay, so they don't know I'm doing this, but that's okay. I'm allowed to do stuff like this. Okay, so this is. Can you see this? Okay. So as part of, so you got, whoever takes my class, you'll learn about these. We're going to do cases on each of these and some others in Founder Mindset. So we'll go deeper into this. But I'm going to read a couple of quotes, David, that you wrote, okay? Great. So I am most attracted to the enormous amount of learning that is required of me to make this company a success. I've never started a company. I have no technical skills. I have no experience with AI. I have never worked in healthcare. I've never raised money. I've never been the sole decision maker on capital allocation decisions. The list goes on and on. I mean, this sounds like a perfect founder. He's just raised $3 million, okay, at an attractive valuation. So, like, how is it possible that you can write that and actually feel like you even have a shot of being a founder?
I think Andre is probably reading that, thinking, "Thank God I passed." All those are true, and the list does go on and on. There's an enormous amount of things that I'm doing every day that I don't know what I'm doing. But what I've seen over the last 2 years is committing to the process has allowed me to start making judgment calls and starting to feel more confident that I can at least figure things out. And so 3 months ago, there are things that I feel I am one of the most experts in probably in the country now, because I've spent hours and hours and hours going into the deep, deep weeds because I have to. And knowing that I've done that before, I can do it again. So anything I look at, it just feels like I can figure it out. So I've gotten a lot of confidence from just doing it.
So this last quote here is, I learned that being committed is actually relieving. It's liberating. Options can be paralyzing. So we're taught here that all options have value, right? Options, we should pursue as many options as possible. I mean, how can that statement possibly be true?
Yeah, I think coming to HBS in particular, it's like a jungle gym of options. It's like this industry, this job, this idea, and you in many ways you come here to expand your option set. And I found that to me was paralyzing. Like I wrote, like I've spent all my time thinking about, is this the right idea? Is this the right customer base? Is this the right time? Am I the right person? And it just totally took me off course. And then when I finally actually committed to it, sat down with my wife, looked at our finances, figured out what it would look like, talked through the pros and the cons over several months, and really committed to it. That was like the biggest unlock for me, was the mental burden or kind of cloud that came with options were removed, and I could just, instead of coming across a problem and thinking, oh boy, this is the one problem, or this is the competitor that's going to sink us, it's just more of a, okay, so now what do I do with that? How do I think about it differently? How do I approach it differently? I have to work through everything because I've committed to it, but when I was uncommitted, I was always, every new information, every downside, every piece of negative information took me off course, set me back. And now these are just things that I'm learning that I need to kind of get through.
You know, David, so on this journey, there's always ups and downs, right? And so for you, you had a co-founder, and you both decided to amicably part. Mm-hmm. But this happened, I recall, because you and I had the conversation. You almost didn't take my IP because you were worried you couldn't commit. And I had a rule that I will never do an IP with you if you don't commit. And you were honest and said, look, I'm not sure I can do this because I'm going through. So you went for, and this was literally 6 months ago, mm-hmm. right? This was in January where you were not certain, mm-hmm. okay? So, and today, I mean, David just did a master class on raising capital where everyone but Andre gave him a term sheet, and he's off to the races, okay? So just talk to me, talk to me about like the mindset shift that happened over the past 6 months. Like, whether it's around judgment or, because it does seem like this judgment piece is something where you've increased your, even going to a solo founder. You never thought about being a solo founder until 6 months ago.
Yeah. Well, I think what my journey over the last 2 years has been a series of, I don't know if I can do it, and then I try it, and then I realize, oh wait, maybe I can do it. Maybe I'm not good at it, but I can do it a little bit. And the most recent, most substantial one of that was being a solo founder. I'd never thought of myself as a solo founder. I like to work in teams. I'm not like a lone wolf type of person. And when we decided it wasn't the right fit for, very amicably said, let's do something different. It was like, okay, I don't know if I can be a solo founder. I don't know if I have it in me to do that. And then for 30 days, I just kept going, and I realized over time, maybe I actually can do this. And so it constantly happened through my journey. I don't know if I can sell, and then I would sell someone. Well, maybe I actually can sell a little bit. I don't know if I can design a product, and I would design a product. Oh, maybe I can do that a little bit. They weren't good the first time, and I failed a lot along the way, but each incremental little win gave me confidence that, there's nothing I can look at and not figure out. I don't have all the answers. Although that list I shared earlier is true, but that one in particular was a really hard one for me because I said, I don't know if I can do this alone.
I mean, here's the thing, right? This idea that as a founder you have certainty around anything is absurd. Okay, it is a goal that you will never achieve. Okay, the question is can you develop your judgment in a way that you are actually willing to make decisions with massively imperfect information? And when you get it wrong, you realize that that's still a net positive because you've learned from it. And you've realized that at least you're in the game of making these decisions. And so I would encourage you, like David did, is jump in. And it's not like jumping off a cliff. It's like jumping in with small commitments. But you don't actually know whether you can get a customer to come join you until you've committed to the thing you want them to join you. So you never actually know whether that magic could happen because you're still paralyzed around whether you can make it happen for yourself. And one of the quotes I love that you said, David, in your report was that once you convinced yourself to commit, it made it much easier to convince others to commit, which is entirely true. Okay, Chelsea, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So I'm Chelsea Grain Jefferson. I've started Grain Hair, which is a hair care brand focused on bringing high-performance products, science-backed products to people with tight curls. Before I came to HBS, I also graduated with David a month and a half ago. Before I went to HBS, I worked at Netflix on their content and business strategy team for 3 years. And then prior to that, I was at Morgan Stanley doing investment banking for 3 years.
Okay, so if I were to describe Chelsea, so Chelsea, I pulled some of your quotes too, or someone pulled some of your quotes, okay? And so this is a tremendously, I mean, I would say you are an example of a very mission-driven entrepreneur, right? Meaning you feel this is a deep sense of purpose, okay? So can you just talk about why this is so important to you?
Yeah, for me, I was really focused on the fact that I felt like a lot of people who looked like me and who had hair like mine were spending so much time and effort on trying to make themselves look a certain way, look presentable, conform, when all that effort could have been spent doing more important things like being with their families, being in meetings, creating new things, being founders. It just felt like a profound waste of time that they had to DIY a bunch of products when there was a multi-billion-dollar industry that their whole job was to design high-quality products for hair care. And this particular demographic just was constantly overlooked. So I felt inconvenienced. I was super busy between Morgan Stanley and Netflix. I just never had any time. And the fact that I had to spend any extra effort worried about making myself look presentable because I had to sit in my kitchen and mix hair care products, I just felt like, I deserved more. People who looked like me deserved more. And I figured, how hard could it really be if these stupid brands who don't know what they're doing can do it with much more basic and easier products? Why can't I figure it out? So that's really what it came down to.
Okay, so one of the things about being a founder, well, first of all, let me just make one point. You can see the difference, right? You're no one would say David has great founder market fit around his business, right? I mean, he just sort of articulated that he had to learn a lot of it over the past few months, and he's now become an expert, and he feels like he's got a set of insights. And then there's Chelsea, who has this deep desire, and some would say real founder market fit. I mean, it's a product that she can use. It's a product that she understands the customer problem, all this sort of thing, okay? So I just want you to see how different people can come at problems, okay? And so, again, I would ask you to think about being a founder, and I'd say the same to Chelsea, is if you can find something you're passionate about at your building, great. But what I'd say, what everyone here is passionate about also is being a founder and having that founder mindset, which is all the things we talked about, okay? So here's the other thing about being a founder is everyone tells you, or just about everyone tells you, that your idea isn't particularly good, okay? So I said to Chelsea, there's a mismatch here. I think you're amazing, but I don't like your idea, okay? I think there's a mismatch, and I don't get it. I don't think it doesn't make sense to me. You should be doing something different, okay? So Chelsea, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one, but obviously we had this conversation. Mm-hmm. Okay, so tell me how it feels when people say things like that, okay? Because every founder hears this all the time, right? All the time. And so how does it feel? How do you actually overcome it? And how does someone who's so used to being told in the HBS system that you guys are all so amazing withstand all this criticism?
So 2 things. I would say at first it was just initially hard. I will say it's very hard when, again, you're, like Reza said, you're used to hearing positive feedback all the time. Initially, figuring out how to like prioritize the feedback you're getting can be difficult. But at some point, I sort of took a step back and said, well, first off, this product's not for you. So that's probably why you don't understand the market. That's the first thing. And then the second thing was I took a step back and was like, okay, well, here are the people who I want to be my customers. Why don't I just ask them? Why don't I just talk to them? So I'm fondly looking at Chisholm over on the screen because she actually tried it.
Oh, great.
And so like me going back and realizing that in the list of priorities, first, I talked to my husband to make sure that if for some reason I bankrupt us, like, are you still gonna love me? And as long as that answer is yes, then I move on to the next person that I talk to, which is all my customers, and get a sense for like, what do you want? What do you need? How can I make your life easier? And what's your reaction to, you know, all these samples and all these prototypes? And if I'm getting the feedback from potential customers and consumers that this is something that they want, the market's big enough, I'm getting enough reactions, then that's who I need to listen to. It's great to hear from you, but I'm not out here fundraising because I don't need to. So like, because I don't have to do that, I don't have to listen to you. I can listen to my customers and just move forth on their information.
I mean, I'd say two things. One is, I think what you're hearing is there's lots of people like me who will pontificate and spend like 5 minutes on your business and say it's not going to work, okay? Right? Like, you're surrounded by people here who do the same thing, okay? Like, your goal is to like figure out who's actually thought deeply about your business. Okay, when you have mentors, here's what I want you to ask them as a founder, okay? Literally the question, because I know there's so many people in this ecosystem that want to give you advice, okay? And most of them actually shouldn't be giving founders any advice, okay? The question you need to ask them is ask them what the most consequential decision they have made, okay? What is the most consequential decision they've made, all right? And that will tell you a lot about the judgment of that person, because ultimately, as a young founder, what you actually want is exposure to people who have strong judgment, okay? And people who have strong judgment are people who've actually exercised it repeatedly, over and over again, almost invariably as founders, okay? And so the question here is she's hearing this feedback, and to her credit, she's curious about it, but ultimately, she's going to go figure out herself with her own information, going to customers and say, you know what? This path makes sense to me, knowing that not everyone's going to agree. And that's the thing. Every business I've built, I can't tell you the number of investors who've turned us down, okay? And what you have to understand is that an investor turns you down for all sorts of reasons. And it's actually kind of efficient, right? Because if you thought about it, if capital was so easy to raise, the opportunity wouldn't exist. It just wouldn't exist, right? And so in some ways, the reason it's so hard is why the spoils are so big, okay? Okay, and then Reza, can I have you come on up? Or I guess not come up, but you can come up, but describe yourself. Yeah, introduce yourself.
So I'm Reza. I was an MD MBA, so started my career thinking I would be a doctor. Worked at a couple insurance companies, tried out a few different things from venture to consulting. Ultimately joined a venture studio right after graduation from business school.
Can you pause for a minute? I just want to pull out one quote. This is from Roja's mother. I cried when I found out. I wanted her to continue doing medical research, and this seemed like a diversion. Okay? So I can say this as coming from an Indian family, like she was meant to be a doctor. Like if you're not a doctor or an engineer, it's all failure all the time. Okay.
I went to a combined undergrad med school program for context. I made the decision when I was 16 years old. So getting off that path was an interesting one. Mm-hmm. I think through the journey of trying these different things, realized that if I wanted to make change in the area that I cared about, which was the way that the healthcare system worked and access to care and access to quality care for patients, that you really had to do it from the outside of the system and do something that was innovative and disruptive. So I'm building Kubera Health, which is a platform for payers and providers to collaborate on value-based care arrangements and do accurate and fair payments for complex claims. And I guess my one point or piece of advice is if you're waiting for, and I think you addressed this a little earlier, but if you're waiting for certainty, you'll never have it. So embrace the uncertainty. Even if you think you have certainty, when you go out to fundraise and you get 50 no's in the span of a month, it will be shaken. When you think you have a customer that's landed and IT shuts you down, and it will be shaken again. So I think just the idea that you're embracing that process of uncertainty, but deciding to persevere through it is really the only thing that...
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because on the one hand, commitment sort of signals stability, but yet what we're talking about is committing to something that feels very unstable, which is uncertainty, right? Which you're hearing over and over again. But I think what you have to think about with respect to uncertainty is it's in those moments of uncertainty, which invariably will lead to some forms of crisis, invariably, right, is where the maximum amount of learning is. And so if your North Star is I want to learn as much as possible, which I would encourage you to think about, that kind of uncertainty is exactly where you want to be, right? It's where you actually want to test your judgment and see if in those moments of uncertainty you can actually create real value. Okay, so Roja, let's talk about some uncertainty for you, right? Because obviously now you've raised a few $1 million, but the path wasn't as straightforward, right? So, and in some ways, I think I have a quote here where you joined an incubator and it didn't work out, right? And so effectively, you thought, okay, I'll go join this place. I'll give up a bunch of 80% of equity, but they'll give me a whole bunch of things. I'm not ready to do this on my own. They will de-risk it, okay? It didn't work out, okay? It was not a positive scenario. And then you have to leave. And so what I want to do is in that moment, because many people at that point would say, I tried, you know, it didn't work out. Why would you trust that given that you'd made such an error, okay, that you could now be all on your own and go build a company as a solo founder?
I think for me, I craved security so much that being somewhere in the middle of being a founder and an employee was what felt like safe enough for me to go try to do. And my biggest takeaway through that process was like that actually, like, you're either a founder or you're not. If you're approaching things as a founder, it's going to be really hard and you're going to learn a lot. And I grew a lot of skills in that year, which I'm very, very grateful for. I think despite the misjudgment of like who my investors were, who my co-founder was in the studio, I think what I did learn was like I created a lot of learnings around my judgment in customer discovery, in product development, in hiring, in who I wanted to be as a founder or the type of missions that I wanted to go address within healthcare. So taking a step back and I look at my learnings there, it was, okay, I made a misjudgment, but that's a good thing. Now I can take this into my next, whatever my next step was, which was at that point, I was like, I really enjoy this process of learning and iterating and having curiosity about how I can improve the healthcare system. And I'm going to still go do that somewhere. But I'm going to take these learnings and be hypercritical about who to fundraise from and who to work with and partner with from a capital structure and from a cap table perspective early on.
You know, so what I'd say is on this, if you think about it, right, in some ways, my argument to you is nirvana happens when you commit and actually embrace the role as a founder, okay, especially coming out of HBS, okay, because there is a tried and true path where you could actually have a reasonable shot of launching a company and raising capital. The reason I focus on capital is because it actually is the signal or the trigger to actually start the most important decisions, which is allocating resources, right? It's when it gets real, right? Where you're actually now responsible for someone else's money, you don't have enough of it, you can't hire enough people, you don't have enough time, all those things, and so the decision-making and the learning really kicks in, okay? So when you think about someone like Roja who was going to be a doctor and is now building a healthcare company, I think if you sat back and you said, okay, from a societal perspective, what's going to have a more positive impact? And so the hope here is that what she's building will have a much more positive impact on many more people than a doctor could, limited with scale on patients, okay? But what I'd also say is her story tells you, and you know what, for those of you who take my class, we're actually, Roja, there it is. Our case on Roja, which will be debuting next semester, is really all about this founder judgment piece, okay? Which is like this decision to de-risk it and go to an incubator, okay, or a search fund. You guys know how I feel about search funds, okay? These are all just modest, like weak decisions, okay, that make you feel like you're getting something, but you're not actually going to where you need to go to. And what was interesting about her story is that she tried the middle one, and instead of sort of recoiling, got confidence from it and said, you know what, this looks like I can do it, okay? Okay, so I want to just quickly ask each of you, two of you were actually Rock Fellows, right? You sat in this seat. Okay, so if you were transparently open with them about how they should, sort of where do you think they are today, and what advice would you give them to maximize their probability of success on this journey?
I remember you, yes. Do you want me to start? Or you want to start? I think by this point in the summer, I had failed quite a few times. So I think by this point, I had visited my lab twice and like cried on the way home both times because all the samples they gave me sucked. And I was like, I do not know what I'm, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, this is a terrible, terrible outcome. And so what I would say is, look, like the whole point of y'all doing this was like trying and doing some customer discovery and like really making some decisions. And like Reza said at the very onset, every consequential decision you make, you're making it with imperfect information. So you are going to fail. If you haven't gotten, knocked on the chin yet this summer, don't worry, that day is coming. And when it does, my recommendation to you is take a second, reflect, wipe the tears, and then get back at it. Like, the whole point of this is you're doing a series of experiments. And if you're not learning at every step of the way and taking that information and using it to inform the next important decision you make, you're kind of wasting the summer. Don't be idle, don't wait, don't not talk to people, don't be, the kind of person who wants to do everything in like stealth and like hide away in a closet and build this whole thing in quiet alone with no feedback. I think it's a waste of having so many great people around you and having a summer to just focus and do nothing else. So go out of your way to put yourself out there, to make mistakes, to try. Don't sit idle. This is not the time to do it because you're going to be busy once the semester starts. And so you're going to have a point of view as to what your next steps are when you have a lot less time to dedicate to your venture.
Yeah, similarly, last year at this time, I was running, I had an idea to do Soul Cycle for basketball. So I was running adult basketball practices in gyms in the area. Still love the idea, but didn't really have financial legs. And I was like, okay, I can't work on this. This is not going to work. And I had to kind of start from scratch. That happened many, many times while I was at HBS. I think my two pieces of advice would be, first is follow your energy. If what you're working on, if you're not excited, if you're not energized by it, you should stop. Because there's no way you're going to last 10 years, which is what's probably needed to build anything of consequence. So it's totally fine if you're not interested in what you're doing. Figure out what you are interested in and just keep going on that. And then the second is commit to the process. Don't worry as much about the outcome. And for me, my process was just hours. I am just going to show up every day. I was going to the iLab. I'm going to be there early. I'm going to go there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single day. And if my energy's high, I'm going to work again at night. But if things aren't going well, I'm still getting there at 8 a.m. If things are going well, I'm still getting there at 8 a.m. And just commit to the hours. And over time, you will find a customer that you're energized by, a problem that you're energized by, or maybe you have maybe you already know that, but maybe there's an angle or an approach that you need to kind of find. But commit to the process and just keep going. Like, just keep going.
Great. Roger, you have anything to add?
I didn't really do entrepreneurial things while I was at HBS, but I think one of my biggest regrets was not using that time more to really dig in. I think the extent to which you can de-risk it for yourself then is probably one of the best opportunities you can give yourself.
I mean, in some ways, you guys have like an embarrassment of riches, right? And there's so much like money around this place, so much advice around this place, so much theoretical mentorship around this place, all this stuff, right? And the question for you is, like, what's the path like that's going to enable you to commit to get the very best out of all these people, as opposed to sort of skimming the surface and going sort of an inch deep? And I would argue to you that it's a very rational decision to commit, because the upside can be so extraordinary and the downside is so limited. Okay? All right, so let me introduce, I thought what might also be interesting is because sort of this idea of trying to launch with capital is available to HBS students, right? All you need to do is look at all the contests and competitions, et cetera, that go on. It'd be interesting for you to hear from a investor who has funded, I mean, as recently as this month, some of one of your classmates, but as a first check-in, right? There's the thing about investors. I almost always say this. Investors, having raised a lot of money, if I had one thing going into an investor meeting as an entrepreneur, you know what it'd be? It wouldn't be a better business model. It wouldn't be like, the greatest team. It would literally be another investor that's committed, okay? Because most investors just want to be led. They want to be led by the founder. They want to be led by other investors. They just want to be led, okay? And so what's very interesting is when you meet someone who's willing to write the first check, okay? So Andre, who is also a former student from many, many years ago, actually, he's from my first class at University of Toronto 20 years ago, and he now runs a seed stage venture fund. So what I'd like Andre to do is maybe introduce himself, and in a period of 8 minutes, Andre, if you can describe to them what you look for as a seed stage investor in a company coming out of HBS or anywhere else. And welcome.
Awesome to be here. Good to meet you all. Can you guys hear me?
We can. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm Andre Charoux, and yes, 20 years ago, Reza taught me a version of what you're hearing. He's a lot kinder these days.
People are too soft.
And,
They're so soft. They're so soft.
The version that I got.
They're so soft. They're very fragile here at Harvard.
I got 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But the quick background is I started my career in investment banking, found that I was more attracted to the founders on the other side of the table. Then I tried my hand at starting a company, which Reza did encourage me to do. I failed. And so, and after shipping a product, raising money, getting customers, building a team, all of that. But it's what introduced me to Silicon Valley. And this is circa 2008. And then I found my place being an early stage employee. I joined 4 companies at the seed stage over a course of a decade, from 2009 to 2019. And 2 out of the 4 happened to work out. One of them was Uber, where I was fortunate to be the 25th employee when it was called Uber Cab, and it was a limousine service. And that's effectively what led me to start a venture firm. I felt deeply sort of drawn to the seed stage, and instead of joining more companies at the seed stage, I figured, I could just join them in another way. Effectively, this is what I feel as though I'm doing as a venture capitalist at the seed stage. I'm joining your journey. And so much of what I look for, which I'll share, is what I was looking for, not necessarily explicitly at the time, or I couldn't have articulated it at the time, but it's what I look for now as an investor. And so my fund is called Maple VC. We are a pre-seed, seed stage fund that's a generalist. I'll effectively invest across all sectors and agnostic to it all. And we'll write that first check. Our checks are anywhere from $500K to $1.5 million. Initially, where both Reza and I are from, our roots hail from Canada, and that's where I was born. And the 2 wins on my resume, including Uber, happen to be companies that were founded by Canadians. And I started to notice that some of the biggest companies in tech in general happen to have this DNA. And so, having left Canada 20 years ago, I noticed a bunch of expats that tend to go off and build some of the biggest companies in tech. And so, as an initial starting point, which was not obvious to most, I decided to back those expats. In the past, they've built Uber, Slack, Instacart, Notion, Fair, Databricks, Cloudflare, Roblox, Moderna Health, which I think came out of HBS, and OpenAI even recently. And so that's been my niche to start. But you all, and this opportunity to partner with Reza around this class, is an opportunity to expand upon that. And effectively, we'll invest in anyone, regardless of their tie or their relation to Canada. So that's Maple. So what do we look for? Well, by the way, just as a point, Reza, like the thing that stuck out to me on this talk, and what hasn't been explicitly said, but I think it's really important as you guys consider to be founders. And I'll actually take the words from the founder of Four Seasons, who happens to be Canadian, by the way, Isadore Sharp, is I think everyone, and including the panel as well, the best way to describe the journey you're going on is your ability to take pain is actually what I as an investor will underwrite or try to figure out. But no one talks about that, and I think really the biggest summary of all this to me is and Four Seasons founder said, excellence is the capacity to take pain. I think Jensen from NVIDIA said a similar quote recently, which is his advice to, I think, a Stanford community of students was, I hope you go through pain and suffering, because that is the only way to determine or build resilience. And so that's what I think the founder journey is actually about, including my journey in founding a venture firm, which is of course different than what you guys are going to undertake. But pain is something I'll lead with, that at the earliest stages when you're investing in people effectively. I mean, yes, I care about your idea, but effectively, the first thing we're underwriting is the person and the people. Your ability to take pain, I think, is really key. Before I go through these quick 6 things in the next 2 minutes, if I'm at the 6-minute mark, you tell me, Reza.
Yeah.
David, I love you, and the reason I passed is not to do.
Okay,
with
so
the
just
things
pause
you
for a minute. Okay, so just pause for a minute.
there.
I invite my buddy Andre to come to class. I give him a first look at these companies, and I say to him, I think some of them are going to be hot, and poor David, you just you got a shot and you just didn't see it.
So, David, yeah, it had nothing to do, and I will tell you all of this because this is really important. As a first check investor, yeah, it has nothing to do.
By the way, you
with
invested in the guy that sat next to him at HBS. You know that. The person you just wrote $1.5 million to.
I do know.
Anuj and Tom sat next to him.
I do know that.
Yeah.
I do know that. I do know that. But the So David is. I learned from spending a bunch of time with David that he has a capacity for pain, and I think hopefully how he explained his journey over his HBS tenure that is true. The main reason I passed, and David knows this, is one of the biggest things I'm looking for at Seed is something that is truly non-consensus. And so while I believe David is likely to build a very consequential company, for me, it felt like there were a lot of other people working on a version of that idea. No offense, David. And one thing you'll hear from me in these things that I'll share just in a minute is that the biggest outcomes, in my belief, and that's just from my lived experience, particularly with Uber, and also to what was mentioned earlier, like most people should laugh at you. Most people should say no. Most people shouldn't see it. It should be non-consensus. And congrats to David, because he got 8 term sheets, people. He got 8 term sheets. And so when I passed, before he got those 8 term sheets, because he gave me the opportunity, as Reza said, I was the first one to take a shot. It just had felt as though it was going to be too competitive and too consensus at the earliest stages. You should hope that your business does get to consensus at some point, but at the earliest stages, that's the main reason. So I was right, David, in that you got 8 wonderful term sheets, and I'm excited for your journey. But that was the main reason. It had nothing to do with David's resilience and his ability to go what I still deeply believe, and I'll have to painfully watch it for the next 10 years, because I know you will be successful, David. So thanks for the opportunity, though, to spend time with you. Okay, the 6 things there are 6 things that I look for, and
Andre, you got to do this fast.
I will. Okay. And for reference, so I don't go through it all in detail, maplevc.com/contact, and I give you 140 characters to try to answer these 6 questions to your best of your ability. So you can follow up there. The 6 things are your tech. What is the 10x solution to the alternative in the market? 2, why now? What's your timing? And particularly around 3 things. What's your enabling tech that allows you to do this today? What's the economic impetus that allows you that folks will buy in today? And then what's a cultural moment in time that you're witnessing that will be a tailwind in your favor here? 3rd, monopoly. What's the initial niche that you can go get a large percentage of? So while most VCs will say, "Give me the biggest TAM," I'm going to ask the exact opposite question. Show me the smallest market you can go after, and tell me how you're going to get 90% of that market. 4, distribution. Oftentimes, I believe your distribution strategy is actually more important than your initial product. And so what are some creative ways that you're going to get it in front of customers? And these, again, just are ideas at the early stages. Number 5 is defensibility. How do you envision this to be defensible in 5 to 10 years? What is the asset that you are acquiring or that your business acquires? And lastly, it's a seeker question, which is a classic Peter Thiel question. So credit goes to Peter Thiel. But what do you believe that others do not believe? And this is the real, you're looking for a contrarian bet. You're looking for something that other people don't see. What do you see that other people do not see? And it could be a unique insight, et cetera. So I'll stop there.
Okay, so let's just, let me just ask a question, then we'll open it up. Let's answer that question, the last question. Who has a unique insight that other people can't see or don't see? You may or may not be right, but who has an insight that they see that they think that others don't see? Come on, someone's got to have an insight. You're all theoretically, okay, Ali, give me an insight that you have that you don't think others see.
Fintechs will never substitute community banks when it comes to SME lending.
Okay, great. Pause. Anyone else? Okay, so that's his insight. It's an interesting insight. It's counterintuitive. Who else has an insight?
I do.
Okay, go ahead. I can't see who it is.
Something that I've learned is that the higher your out-of-pocket deductible is, the lower your health outcomes are. You're less likely to go to your providers, your primary care providers, on an annual basis.
Okay, so here's what I would encourage all of you. I promise you, all of you have insights that other people don't believe. Okay? It is not, the problem isn't that. The problem is you don't actually think your insight has any meaningful value. Okay? Meaning, you actually think deep down that the insight you have, someone else with far more resources surely has thought about that insight and surely has disproved that insight. And I will just tell you that if you look at all the great founders, if they behaved with that mindset, their businesses would not exist today. Okay? And so what I would encourage you to do is you all have these insights. Okay? The problem is you're racked with insecurity about whether they're real or not because others have far more resources and should have come up with these insights. And what I'd encourage you to do is to actually explore these insights. Okay? This is not the full C commitment where you're jumping off a cliff. This is the small C commitment of just saying, you know what? I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong, but I'm going to spend 15 or 20 minutes on this insight. And even if for those of you who are analytical, you can think about it this way. That's 15 or 20 minutes of your life that may be wasted, or it may change your life. Okay, meaning it may lead to something else and something else and something else. But until you actually start training your mind to actually start thinking about these insights that are counterintuitive and trusting your judgment that you may actually come up with something, it's never going to happen. Okay? So when Andre asked that question, you all should have like 10 answers to that question. And the reason you don't is because you just have convinced yourself that the insights have no value. You've just convinced yourself of that. And it's not true. People miss things all the time. All the time. Okay, let's okay, I want to go to our lawyers in the group. Steen, why are you here? Like, what are you doing here, Andrew?
It's great to see you, Reza. I love your shoes. I don't think anyone's
you like those?
About your shoes yet,
I got these for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's coming up for you?
Well, finally, my last year in school. I'm working on a startup. This summer, I've been doing it since late fall, basically trying to build a tech-enabled marketplace to help streamline access to substance use treatment. On obviously one side of the marketplace, you have treatment centers. On another side, I've been working with a lot of lawyers, clinicians, basically people who spend a lot of their time sending others to treatment. And the value proposition for them is that, like, the current landscape, it's really fragmented, it's really opaque. There's no like tech-enabled way to basically find what's out there. So they'll spend hours, days, weeks on it. And I think if there was like something adjacent to like an Airbnb, OpenTable, Uber Eats throughout that landscape, it would be a much quicker process, which has a ton of social impact and I think business benefits as well.
Mm-hmm. What question might you have for these three?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I struggle with in like a marketplace is deciding who. I don't want to overcomplicate things. Basically, like there's two tracks that I'm looking at now, and I think in one track it's obvious that only one side should pay, and then in another track I actually think multiple sides should pay. And so like how to prioritize building a multi-sided marketplace where you have a chicken and the egg problem. You have to provide a value for someone up front that is not the value you're going to provide once you hit kind of the network effects. Like how high efficacy are those experiments when you're getting people on board for something that isn't like the long-term vision? Does that make sense? I could explain.
Is there anyone here who has any? Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
Platform. We sell to both sides. I mean, I went for 6 months. I could not decide who to pick first. I tried to do both. It just created more chaos than anything else. I think what I ended up landing on was pick one that felt like the pain point was more obvious, that it felt easier to solve more immediately, and then do that well, and then layer on the other one on top. You can always add more later, and you can always revamp the business model or the shared payments between the two sides later on. But it's hard to build two products or build for two very different customer segments at the same time when you're resource strapped.
David?
It's probably doubling down on what you said. My general advice is think less and do more. Just pick one and just start doing it and see what breaks. I feel like at HBS we spend a lot of time assessing businesses and ideas and companies, and there's 100 reasons why my business won't work. But what I think is the better way to learn is just pick a side and just start serving it until you get to a scale where you have to do something different. Go to conferences, talk to people, start selling things you don't have. Don't promise things you don't have.
I'd make
sell.
Just
sell.
Yeah, right. I'd make it a broader point, which is, I think as a founder, the way to think about it is this concept of if in doubt, act. Okay, literally, it's the opposite of the way you're trained. Even the decision not to do anything is a decision. The decision you're making right now is a decision, which is not to choose. It just feels like a safe decision, right? Because you're not making a decision. And so I would train your brain to think that when you're in doubt, you're going to act. You're actually going to force yourself to make a decision, okay? And it's in those moments of uncertainty and action where enlightenment will come, okay? Okay, Taylor, I got to call on you. So Taylor, tell us what you're learning from this. And I mean, Taylor, so let's talk about options, right? Lots of options available to many HBS students, right? I have this phrase, the curse of optionality, which is all of you guys have hundreds of options. And my biggest fear for all of you with all this potential is you'll never actually pick one. and never see what you're truly capable of, and the world won't get the benefit of the impact that you might be able to have. So tell me how you wrestle with this option point versus commitment.
Yeah, you're really putting me on the spot here. And sorry, I'm in the airport, so if there's background noise, bear with me.
I mean, Taylor, you must have known I was going to put you on the spot.
Yes, but I haven't really announced this broadly yet, so I was kind of hoping.
Oh, I haven't announced. We don't have to announce anything. I haven't announced anything. I don't think I've announced anything. Have I announced anything? Yeah. I think you're jumping somewhere. I'm not announcing anything. I'm just asking you, generally speaking, how do you, just take a step back, okay? Just pause. Take a step back. How do you think about commitment versus collecting options?
I think I definitely struggle with this. And so I think that has been what stopped me from actually committing capital to my idea, because I do think, I don't know if that is a reflection of me not having enough conviction around this idea. I know I want to found, it's just at what point in my life is that while I'm at HBS, is that later in life? And so I think that is something that I'm still wrestling with this summer. And so I get right up until the point where I'm going to sign a contract or commit capital, and then I halt.
Yeah. So this is interesting, right? Which is this concept of like, what is it that's blocking you? And I think what I'm curious about, to me, like if I look at these three, right, they're all now launched and building something. And I think to myself, okay, the upside here is they actually build something really significant. They really enjoy it. Yes, there's pain, but frankly, I'd rather be going through the pain than someone on top of me giving me the pain, okay? And like they're in a position where they get to actually manage through it and learn through it. So, and of course, there's the downside of it not working. And so the question then is, okay, how bad is that downside? Like how bad is it for a group of HBS students to fail? Right? How bad is it? And so the question I have for all of you, because I suspect many of you think it's really bad, okay? All right, so Sanchi, how bad is it for you to fail? You got to come off mute. You know, this is the best comment she's made all semester. Can you not come off mute? Okay. By the way, that was funny. Wasn't that funny?
Can you hear me now?
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, sorry. No, I think it's pretty embarrassing, but it will still be better than getting scolded over a model at a private equity fund.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, look, I think it's just important everyone put this stuff in perspective, because just don't underestimate what you're capable of. Okay. And I think what this school does do is give you lots of opportunities to launch in the way that these three have launched. Okay. And people like Andre show up with a checkbook wanting to invest, right? You've got to convince him, but he's wanting to invest. And so, and there are many people like that. And so the real question is can you, over the next 6 to 9 months, do things that put you in a position where you are trying to raise capital next semester? And so what I'd say to you is this summer has to be a productive summer for you. Like it has to be a summer where you actually like settle on an idea, or you've made some traction, some experimentation, you've made it. So let's take co-founders, right? David is unusual, okay? Most people should be able to figure out whether they want a co-founder or not, okay? And David had to deal with a situation where he had to decide whether, okay, he lost his co-founder, is he actually going to go ahead with it? But there's certain things like, you know, and Dylan, you talk about financial considerations. These are knowable things. I mean, they're unfortunate knowable things, but they're knowable things. And so what I'd hate for you to do is to sort of say, I'm going to go down a founder path, but actually I'll never found anything unless I have a co-founder. And many of you, it's true, you won't jump unless you have a co-founder. First business I built, I needed a co-founder, but I knew it before I committed to actually founding, because I knew that would be a gating item to founding. And so figure out what those gating items are now, so that you're in a position where next semester in the fall, you're really settling an idea, you're doing your experimentation, you're figuring out what is truly different about your business, okay? And so I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts, okay? So I want you to focus on something here, which is really, this is my sort of little founder mindset sheet, okay? To me, the thing we're solving for is impact. Like all of you, if I said to you, what do you want to do over the next 30 years? And I've done this with so many students, you'll all say, like, in 30 years, I want to have this massive impact, okay? And I would just ask you to reverse engineer the steps that maximizes the probability for you having that impact. And invariably, I think it starts with having better judgment, okay? And ultimately, if you want maximum learning, maximum impact, you're not smart enough to do it unless you commit, okay? And it's a circle, because obviously you need the judgment to commit, and then you obviously, once you've committed, you continue to express your judgment, such that you get the benefit of someone like, you mentioned Cloudflare, Andre, Michelle Zatlin, who'd never managed anyone before she came to HBS, and now she's running Cloudflare and was managing, a couple of thousand people at the age of 30, precisely because at the age of 26, she started thinking about what lease should she sign for her first office, who should be her first employee. All of these things snowball, okay? And I'd ask you to think about, I have this phrase, this is like the founder's journey is like the hero's journey. What I would say to you is put a line through the middle of this, okay? The top half is the current, like the ordinary world, or where there's certainty, and the bottom half is sort of the extraordinary world, where it's full of uncertainty. And what I hope is that you enter into the world full of uncertainty, okay, where there's lots of crisis, where there's lots of peril, where there's lots of conflict. But in that crisis, conflict, peril, there's tremendous learning, and that you re-enter the ordinary world with the capacity to have a very positive impact, okay? And in many ways, this is what I see as the founder journey. Okay, how will you learn the most? I think we can all agree that if I said to you over the next 5 years, the thing that you're going to do the most is learn, I just want you to think about learning with this definition, okay? I know, I'm curious what other people's definitions of learning is. This is my definition of learning, okay? Make consequential decisions that you are accountable for. So whether you're a founder or not, you're not, in my mind, you are not learning anywhere near as quickly unless you're actually making decisions, okay? Because what decisions allow you to do is to build the judgment muscle, the thing you most want, all right? So there's these chief of staff roles, these advisory roles, all of these roles are not optimizing for learning. They feel good coming out of HBS, but they are not optimizing for learning. Okay, well, that slide doesn't look very good. Okay, think about commitment, because I've had so many people come into my office and they're so scared of commitment. Don't think about it as jumping off a cliff into an ocean full of sharks. Okay, think about what I said to you about these insights. Think about it as a series of small commitments. Trust your judgment to do the small things. When you have an idea, explore it. Even though most of your brain will be saying, I know nothing about this idea. Someone else has way more resources and should have thought about it. Give yourself permission to trust your judgment. And you'll be wrong most of the time, but you'll learn from it. The alternative is much worse, where you don't actually practice. So every time over the summer where you have an insight, okay, go explore it. Just start exploring it. Okay, I won't go into this, but I have a whole theory around risk miscalibration and how there is so much here at HBS where people talk about unacceptable outcomes, and the reality is you have so few unacceptable outcomes ahead of you, okay? What you have is several upside outcomes, and so I would encourage you to optimize for the right tail, because if not you, then I don't know who. Okay, I mentioned this research report, which I think is important, and I've probably mentioned it to you guys before, but I do think you guys like data, okay? So I mentioned this is a colleague of ours at Harvard, Paul Gompers, who's come out with this research, which actually shows that fail founders with the same background, same professional degrees and educational background, come back to the corporate world with 3 years of seniority, okay? This is across 5 million data points. And it actually makes complete sense to me, even though so many of you are startled by it. And the reason it makes complete sense to me is because the market actually has it right. They're valuing the fact that someone who actually went out and made a whole bunch of decisions and failed learned far more than someone who just went up the chain and made very few decisions, okay? And so 3 years is not an insignificant leap. Okay. I want to end, because we're running out of time. I want to talk about commitment, okay, as a superpower. I think that if you look at the world around us today, okay, commitment is viewed as a sacrifice, Okay, and I'm not just talking about founding. I'm talking about in relationships. I'm talking in dating. I'm talking about all sorts of things. There's so much distraction. Okay, and what's happened is people have forgotten that commitment is the thing that actually brings contentment. Okay, and so when I talk to you about this research report from Bob Waldinger, which is all about, evaluating these people who've lived for 80 years, what is it that gives them contentment? And by a long shot, it's these enduring long-term relationships. Now, you guys probably aren't old enough to know what an enduring long-term relationship looks like, but I will tell you what it looks like is one that's full of crisis and one that goes up and down, okay? And what it requires is commitment, all right? So what I want you guys to stop thinking about commitment as a sacrifice. Think about it as a superpower. Think about it as no longer I'm going to go to Blackstone because that'll enable me to do all these things, or I'm going to go to McKinsey because it will preserve all these options. You've done all that. You've maximized you've got tons of optionality because you went to HBS. It's always going to be pretty good. And so my hope for every one of you is that you'll commit not to just a great business, but commit to a series of things that you really care about. Because I think the thing you most want, which is to have a positive impact, will most likely come through that series of commitments, okay? However painful they may be along the way, okay? And there is pain involved, okay? So look, we've got 4 minutes. I'm happy to answer any questions either of me or of the panel or of Andre. But I'll just leave you with, this talk was conceptual. The reason I wanted the 3 founders here is it's hard work. So you've got to decide whether you want it. You've got to decide whether you're going to work super hard and go do it and take all the no's, knowing that one day someone's going to jump in with you. And the magic will happen. You will experience it. I guarantee you will experience it. Okay? The question is whether you'll let yourself actually go there. Okay? All right. So anyone have any questions? I promised some questions. I don't know if you guys have any. Yeah, Kenny.
I would love to hear from the panel what sorts of activities you did to find a right co-founder and what really helped you accelerate that process to finding a co-founder.
It's interesting. All of them are solo founders, coincidentally. You know what? They don't have any friends.
I did propose to somebody to be my co-founder, and I would say that what helped me really see whether or not we were capable of working together was doing startup operations together. So we did that plus 2 IPs in the spring and startup operations studio together, and that was a great way to start working together, see what our working styles are, understand her level of commitment to the business, and whether or not she and I had a similar or complementary vision. And I think the good thing about that is typically if it's a business that you are the initial starter of, they will not bother you about equity at the very onset. To get into startup operations, you have to have people working with you. So for her, she just wanted the credit, and that made it easy for me because I was like, okay, now we can just focus on whether or not we actually get along, and we don't have to worry about early bickering about how much equity is your time potentially worth because I don't even know what you bring to the table. So that's a good way to start to suss out what kind of working relationship you can have before you even start having discussions about equity.
I think I've had co-founders. What I'd say is I think I agree completely with Chelsea. I would say what you need to figure out, we all know that co-founder strife is probably the single most important factor to why businesses fail. And so what you need to figure out is how do you resolve conflict and how will your co-founder behave in times of crisis, which inevitably there will be many. And part of the problem is you come together with all this optimism and a blank sheet of paper, okay? And it feels like, it's all going to be great. And so the best way to figure out what things look like in crisis is to actually start working together and see how you think, how you behave to each other, all these sorts of things. I would also say that as co-founders, once you lock arms, I've heard lots of things about how you want to change equity over time. I think those are all disasters. Once you lock arms, forevermore you lock arms. Okay? The equity split is what the equity split is. There will be times when it will feel fair. There will be times when it feels unfair. But the idea that you're not a team going to war together will lead to, so you've got to start with all these conversations around what does it take to be fully committed to each other, not just in good times, but in bad times, in times when there's disagreement, in times when customers leave, all the things that invariably will happen.
I would just add, don't let it prevent you from making progress, and you can add co-founders later on.
Yeah, Sana. You probably know.
This is a question for David. You mentioned you tested a few different ideas, were thinking about a few different ideas during your time at HBS. What was the process or decision points that helped you land on what you're working on today?
Time with customers, 10x more than anything else. Just sitting with them, understanding who they are as people, what they care about, how they make decisions, what stresses them out. You have to listen to them, and then you also have to not listen to them. Look at their P&Ls, go observe them. People 100 years ago wanted a faster horse. So you have to think about, what do they actually want? They want to get somewhere faster. Okay, can I solve that problem in a way someone hasn't done before? But time with customers is everything. The way Chelsea said it. Don't listen to investors. Sorry, Andre. Don't listen to reports. Don't look at what competitors are doing. Time with customers. By the time I fundraised, I felt so confident what I was building is because I had a chorus of people who were saying, I need this today, which is what allowed me to go do it, which only came from time with customers.
So it's remarkable, right? Because in many ways that can give you such great conviction.
Totally.
Because you see the problem.
Yeah.
And it's actually the one constituency that's not around HBS.
Yes.
Right? Like you got lots of professors, investors, advisors, mentors. There are no customers. So this is something you got to go do on your own.
And I was going to say, do weird free stuff for them. Like I sat in clinics. I said like, oh, you need a printer? I'll do research for you and tell you what printer to get. And then I'd be like, wow, this is great, thanks. What other problems do you have? And then they slowly let you in. You build relationships with these people, and then suddenly you're like actually friends with them, and that's when you really get the learning. So
but this is what I mean. This is when you commit and show up, right? Like this is nothing more than who else is going to do that? So by definition, it's unusual, right? Like he's showing up and solving a printer problem, but it's meaningful. And suddenly you can build a relationship with someone, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to give this kid a break. I'm going to give him a shot. Like no one else is showing up in this way. So you got to do things that are different, that are memorable. Okay.
Add one thing to that.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
If you're a software engineer, then you're taught that your like MVP should be a hacky prototype. If you're an HBS student, your like MVP should probably be consulting services. Like you should go try to do your product as a consulting project and prove that that actually solves a problem.
Totally. Okay. All right. Well, listen, guys, I think time's up. I hope that you will take the summer seriously. I think that the chance of you building anything of significance next year, if you don't actually make real meaningful progress this summer, is close to nil. And I would just encourage you to start trusting your judgment, exploring it, and start making these small commitments. Okay. All right. Good luck to all of you.
Hey, Reza, can we grab their emails? I'm not sure if the alumni or the LinkedIn is the best way to connect with the founders. Do you guys mind sharing your?
Are you guys open to that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So look, I mean, I think if you guys have a few, I mean, I think they're around if you want to keep talking, but I'd say they're open to it. So Ben will send it out to you guys then.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, but I do think people who've just done this are probably the most relevant to you and to your experience, your upcoming experience. Okay.
Yeah, I'm really excited to connect with both Roja and Kubera. Not obviously, I think the aspect of using healthcare in the way that you guys have talked about is really interesting. I'm working on a platform that helps launch private practices, and so talking to you all would be really helpful at a later time. So look forward to it.
Okay, so Han, that's exactly the kind of thing you want to do. You've been waiting to say that all class. You made the ask, and now you'll get the conversation. So that's exactly the kind of thing you guys need to do, right? It's like, just trust your judgment, jump in. The downside was you were just going to get cut off. The upside is, I think Rojo will probably meet with you based on that minute. Okay?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks, guys.